Welcome everyone to another video on the MLPC Linguística channel. I am Mauricio Carvalho, and this is one additional episode of our Brazilian Portuguese course. On this episode, we'll talk about Brazilian Portuguese verbs, the basics of the verbal system. Of course, the verbal system is rather complex as in any language. So on this video, we'll get at least the basics, the basic introduction to the system. On later videos, there will be further details exposed and explained. Let's get on and take a look. First, go back to the pronoun system. You can see, please make a screen capture of this table and put it somewhere where you can look it up all the time, because it's knowing the pronoun system is essential, otherwise you won't get anything. So please copy this table of pronouns and put it somewhere else, and watch the Brazilian pronoun video also. The Brazilian pronoun video already posted on the channel. And of course, if you want to learn Brazilian Portuguese with a private tutor, a private teacher, over the internet using Telegram or WhatsApp or any app you want, you can contact me. I'll teach you, and I'll teach other languages as well, such as German, Russian, Swedish, Italian. Just contact me on the email that you see below, and further information can be found under this video. So going to the verbs, you can see here the verbs ser and estar. Portuguese splits the concept of to be into basically two verbs, one meaning an inherent long-term feature of something, to be inherently something, or estar, which is to be for the moment, to happen to be right now but not permanently, something more superficially associated, more momentaneous, more transient than inherent. So ser is inherent. Eu sou, you can see there, eu sou, você é, ele é, nós somos, vocês são, eles são. That's the present of the verb to be. I am, you are. The imperfect is era, éramos, eram. Eu era, I was. Eu fui also means I was, but it's a present perfect. The imperfect and the perfect in Portuguese are distinguished by that they're both past tense, but in imperfect being something that is more prolonged in time. Hence in the time, it can be something that happened over, repeated itself multiple times in the past, or it can be something that is perceived as having prolonged itself during a considerable amount of time, a long time, and not a point in time. The perfect is a point in time, an action that happened, one event that happened in the past, and that's it. The event is unique and perceived to have an irrelevant amount of duration. The duration is relevant. What's relevant is the fact that it's over, that it's one event that took place, and that's it. For the verb ser is fui, in the first person, fui. And then você foi, ele foi, nós fomos, eles foram, vocês foram. The verb estar, eu estou, você está, ele está, nós estamos, vocês estão, eles estão. In the imperfect, eu estava, which means I was, I used to be. We'll see the exact usage in a second. And the perfect, eu estive, I was, I have been somewhere, something that is a more unique single event in the past. The verb estar is usually, in colloquial speech, it's usually pronounced without the first syllable, with the S in the end. This S is usually dropped, and only the tar is pronounced. So you usually don't say eu estou, you say eu tô. You usually don't say ele está, which he is. Ele está aqui. He is here. You don't say ele está aqui in colloquial speech, in fast pronunciation, everyday pronunciation. You say ele tá aqui. Eu tô. Ele tá. Nós estamos. Eles estão. Eu tava. In the past, imperfect. Eu tava aqui. Ele tava aqui. He was here. Even in the perfect sometimes. Ele teve aqui. Ele teve aqui ontem. He was here yesterday. So that's colloquial pronunciation, which is far more common in everyday speech than the formal full pronunciation that's based on spelling and includes the S. Another verb is the verb to have. Ter. In Portuguese, ter. The infinitive is ter. The present tense is tenho. Eu tenho, I have. Você tem, ele tem, you have, he has. Nós temos, vocês têm, eles têm. we have, you, plural, have, they have. In the imperfect, tinha, tínhamos, tinham. And in the perfect, tive, teve, tivemos, tiveram. We can move on to a typical regular verb. What is a verb that represents the majority of verbs, or gives you the typical, most commonly used type of verb in Portuguese? That's falar. For example, falar could be one example, the verb to speak. It's a regular verb that belongs in the a conjugation, the verb that ends in the vowel. The thematic vowel after the stem is a falar. So eu falo, I speak. Tu falas, that's a classical, I'm giving you the full paradigm, classical paradigm, which is no longer used, the second person no longer used. Tu falas, ele fala, nós falamos. Vós falais, eles falam. The imperfect, falava, falávamos, falavam. And the perfect, falei, falaste, falou, falamos, falastes, falaram. Okay, the second person forms are no longer used. So when you use the pronoun você, use the third person for forms. Você falou, you spoke. Another very important verb is the verb to go. Okay, that's eu vou, tu vais, ele vai, nós vamos, vós ides. Most Brazilians don't even know that this form exists. Highly irregular, that doesn't exist. Eles vão. Okay? In the past, ia, I was going, I used to go. And in the perfect, fui, I have gone, I went. Eu fui, tu foste, ele foi, nós fomos. The perfect of the verb to go is identical with the perfect of the verb ser, to be, which is very interesting. And of course, I'll explain why that happens. In Spanish, that happens as well. So if you came from Spanish, you're already familiarized with this strange convergence between the perfect of the verb to go and the perfect of the verb to be. But we'll talk about that later. Here is the verb entender. This is also irregular. The third most common type of verbs is the verbs in ir. The verbs in the letter I, in the end, abrir, to open. Maybe about 5-7% of verbs in Portuguese belong in that category. Most are irregular. I'm going to show you one of the few that happens to be irregular, which is abrir. Okay, we have to dedicate a whole video to these verbs. They're not that common, but they show some strange irregularities here and there. The verb to open, abrir, eu abro. Você abre, ele abre, nós abrimos, eles abrem. Abria in the imperfect. Abri, abriu in the perfect. Abrimos, abriram. So I've given you the present, the past imperfect, and the past perfect so far. There are, of course, many other forms. One of them is the gerund, the progressive form. Just like English, you can say I speak, but you can say I am speaking. Okay, I travel and I am traveling. So this is, in Portuguese, the verbal system is very similar to English. It's almost like the exact match of English in 95% of cases, even though the meanings, specific meanings and usages happen to be somewhat strangely divergent in a few cases, but for over 90% of verb forms, Brazilian Portuguese has the same logic, inherent logic as English, and also not unlike Spanish as well. So, eu estou falando. This is the verb estar, to be. One of the verb to be. That's a verb to be that indicates transient, short duration features. Eu estou falando. I happen to be speaking right now. That's a transient feature. Eu estou falando. Okay, remember that the first syllable is dropped, so people don't say eu estou, that's too formal. People say eu tô falando. I'm speaking. Just like I don't say I am in English, I say I'm speaking. In Portuguese, you say eu tô falando, I am speaking. The third person, you can say ele tá falando. He is speaking. Eles estão falando. Eu estou falando com ele, eu tô falando com ele. Eu tô falando com ele. I'm speaking with him. Ele estava falando com ela. He was talking to her. He was speaking with her. Ele estava falando com ela. Ele estava falando com ela. Com ela. There's also a like the equivalent of the past perfect in Portuguese, but it's not exactly the same as the past perfect in English. The meaning of the Brazilian Portuguese past perfect, which is formed with the verb to have plus the past participle, the meaning is the same as the English past perfect progressive. So when you say eu tenho falado, it's not I have spoken. Eu tenho falado is I have been speaking. Indicates a repeated habitual action that started in the past and has been going on until the present. So when I say eu tenho falado com ele todos os dias, desde a semana passada. I have been speaking with him every day since last week. Indicates an action that's habitual. That's different from the present perfect in English. Because the present perfect, I have spoken, indicates only one action. I have spoken with him recently. It means a recent, just finished, single action, typically. I have been speaking, which is has the same meaning as eu tenho falado, indicates a habitual, repeated action. I have been speaking with him every day for the past couple of weeks. That's what this form means in Portuguese. So the Brazilian Portuguese present perfect, eu tenho falado, has the meaning of the English present perfect progressive. I have been speaking. He has been speaking. He had been speaking. You can use the pluscuamperfect progressive as well. He had been speaking would be ele tinha falado. Or he had spoken. Ele tinha falado would be he had spoken. Would be the pluscuamperfect, the past interior, the past interior. When I arrived, he had already spoken. Quando eu cheguei, ele já tinha falado. The future can be made with the verb ir. We saw that, the verb to go. The future is typically in colloquial Portuguese formed informally with the verb to go plus the infinitive in the present. So you say, eu vou falar. I'm going to speak. I'm going to speak. I will speak. There is also a suffixal, a conjugation that is the future tense, which is the infinitive suffix by the verb the verb haver in the present. We're going to see that later. The verb haver we haven't seen it yet, but eu falarei is I will speak. That's a little bit more formal. It's like I will speak, I shall speak, I am to speak. Sounds a little bit more formal. Typically in everyday conversations you say, eu vou falar, ele vai falar, nós vamos falar, eles vão falar. Eu ia falar is the conditional. I would speak. I was going to speak, but I didn't. I was going to speak. I would speak if I could. Eu ia falar. But you can also say, you can take the ia and put it in the end of the verb. Because this ia is the imperfect of the verb to go. I mean, I was going to. So, eu falaria. So you can put the ia as a suffix on the verb's infinitive. And say, eu falaria, ele falaria, nós falaríamos, eles falariam. And also say, eu teria falado. Teria is the condition of the verb to have. Teria, I would have. And then falado, the past participle. So I would have spoken. This is teria falado. I would have spoken. Eu teria falado. I would have spoken. Ele teria falado. He would have spoken. And the final feature that I'll mention in this video, there will be later videos, other videos dedicated to the verbal system, because there's a lot to talk about it. Still left that I haven't spoken. Only the basics were approached here in this video. Will be the passive voice. That's the passive voice. It's just like in English. It's formed by the verb to be, is the auxiliary verb. In case of Portuguese, ser, not estar, ser. And the verb ser plus the past participle of the whatever verb you're putting in the passive, just like English. So, é falado, is spoken. Está sendo falada, is being spoken. Essa palavra está sendo falada. This word is being spoken. Essa palavra estava sendo falada, estava sendo falada. This word was being spoken. Essa palavra era falada, was spoken. Essa palavra foi falada. This word was or has been spoken. Essa palavra tinha sido falada. This word had been spoken. Essa palavra será falada, will be spoken, future passive. And seria falada. Essa palavra seria falada. This word would be spoken. That's examples of the passive voice. It's very easy, and if you speak English, this will be extremely easy. But you have to go back to the verb to be and really memorize and train those forms. If you want to practice all of these verb forms with me, with a native, highly proficient linguist and teacher and translator of Portuguese, and almost perfect speaker of English as well, almost native level speaker of English, you can contact me, and I'll teach Brazilian Portuguese to you over the internet using any app that's of your convenience, like Telegram or WhatsApp or Zoom. And we have classes as many times a week or a month as you would like. We can arrange a plan, and within a few months, you'll certainly not be perfectly fluent, but within maybe a year or two, you'll be reasonably fluent in Brazilian Portuguese, because learning a language takes, of course, usually a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years. But with me, you have the proper tutoring, and don't forget to subscribe, and also keep your eye open, because many other videos on the Brazilian Portuguese series will be posted briefly. And if you're watching this video in the future, they are already posted, so take a look at the playlist and search for my videos to watch the full series of Brazilian Portuguese videos on the Brazilian Portuguese course by MOPC on YouTube or whatever other social media you're watching this on. And I'll see you on the next video.